Today on a special 100th episode of the Bourbon Bytes podcast, Willett fills the first barrel at their new Springfield Distillery. Bacardi takes ownership of Teeling Irish Whiskey. And we have new releases from Four Roses, Blade & Bow, and Frey Ranch. Plus, is the day cap the new nightcap? Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special 100th episode of the Bourbon Bytes podcast. I'm your host Clifton, and this is the week of Thursday, June 25th, 2026. Happy summer. I know it's kind of a bit of a slump in the world of whiskey. At least a lot of people are out there drinking cocktails, gin, vodka, things like that. But I know you're a bourbon fan, and I know you enjoy whiskey year-round, because why would you be listening to this if not? But I do want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone for listening for these 100 episodes, whether you're new or have been here since the beginning. I've really enjoyed making this podcast, and I'm happy to keep it going for maybe another 100. We'll see. The first story we have today is from Willett. As I mentioned in the intro, they are filling their first barrels at their new Springfield Distillery. This happened last Thursday, which actually coincided with Miss Martha Colesveen's birthday. Now, if you didn't know that name, just like I didn't, she was a member of the Bourbon Hall of Fame who resurrected the Willett Distillery in the 1970s and has had a long-term commitment to the brand. They say while the construction is not yet complete, they're planning to build this 70,000 square foot facility across 150 acres and also open it up to new visitor experiences on the property. Now they're saying this isn't a relocation. They're going to keep their Bardstown operations, but they're going to expand to this new location for future operations. They say our Bardstown roots remain heart to who we are. Springfield gives us room to grow while allowing us to continue building on the legacy, craftsmanship, and hospitality that have always defined Willett. So really cool to see another massive expansion in the world of bourbon, especially with a big distillery like Willett. I can't wait to see what they do at this location. Speaking of massive news, it was announced earlier this week that Bacardi is going to take full ownership of Teeling Irish Whiskey. So they previously had a minority stake in it since 2017, and they became the majority shareholder in 2022, but now they are going to become the full owner for Teeling. Now, this was surprising to me, but then I looked at other brands under the Bacardi portfolio. It seems like they have like one major brand across so many different types of spirits. I'm not surprised to see them come in and get a Irish whiskey. I am a big fan of Teeling, and I hope they continue to make it as available as it is now. Usually I'm looking forward to these type of acquisitions only because it gives more expansion and more availability, but Teeling's already pretty available, so not quite sure what the advantages are here, but they seem to both be very happy about this decision, and yeah, just wanted to report on that. So if you're looking for Teeling, make sure to go to wherever you get your other Bacardi spirits at. You're sure enough to find it here soon. All right, well, there are a few new whiskey releases I wanted to hit on real quick, one of which we actually covered back when there was a TTB label revealed for this. But Four Roses has officially announced their experimental series. They're launching it with experimental series number 1, which is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey finished in Japanese Mizunara oak barrels. But what's interesting is this is a 6-year-old OBSK recipe. So that was one piece of information we didn't have before. It's also going to be released at a price of $55 per bottle. Now that is a 375 milliliter bottle, so a smaller bottle than normal. And it's going to be available for purchase at the Four Roses Distillery Visitor Center beginning on July 30th. So this is the first in a series of experimental releases. We're seeing this a lot at all these distilleries, even the big ones, right? Big ones that you don't typically see much experimentation from are starting to get into the game. We talked about Green River last week, and then of course, Bardstown Bourbon Company has had their Distillery Reserve series. So it seems to be a thing that's catching on across the board, and I feel positive about it. I love the chance to offer something exclusive to visitors of a distillery. I'm saying that as someone in Southern California who can't make it out to most distilleries at most times, but I do encourage tourism on the Bourbon Trail. So to me, this seems like a good release, a good addition to the Four Roses lineup, and gives you another reason to go check out the distillery, because it doesn't come out until July. So stay tuned for that one. Another new one is coming to us from Blade & Bow, and this is going to be a new annual expression from them. It is a 12-year-old Solera Reserve. What's interesting is Blade & Bow has made news recently with their high-end, like 22-year-old bourbons. I keep hearing about that one, but this is a bit of a change of pace. This is a 52% ABV bourbon going for $65. Now, it's worth mentioning it is a Solera cask situation where they, of course, integrate layers of different batches and kind of have an ever rolling composition of this whiskey. So it's ever changing. But with the 12-year age statement, that means the youngest whiskey in this experiment, or whatever you want to call it, this project, is 12 years old. So they're not funneling in young whiskey. Instead, they're going to actually combine different cask influences like cognac, port, Bordeaux to really create, like I said, this layered, complex whiskey. So I'm excited to see what this does over time. I know Barrel Craft Spirits has done something similar with a Solera cask, but you don't really see it in mainstream whiskey. So for $65, I think this is a fun one. It's definitely one I would like to try before I buy. Maybe I would buy a pour of it at a bar. But yeah, I'm appreciating a 12-year age statement, and $65 price is nothing too bad. So well done to them. All right, last new release I want to mention is the new Frey Ranch 10-year-old bourbon. I'm a big fan of Frey Ranch out of Nevada. Now, this was released as a lottery, as a chance to purchase up to 2 bottles per person this past week. It was $100 a bottle. I entered it. I did not win a chance to buy a bottle, but I wish I would have, because I think $100 for an inaugural batch of their 10-year-old bourbon whiskey is something that I would love a chance to have. Now, one thing I'm not seeing on this page is the actual proof of this whiskey. I'm not sure if they just haven't decided or it's going to be varying in proof. I'm not sure, but I'm looking at the label and it doesn't say the proof. So maybe they're holding that back from us until after pre-orders have sold out. All right, well, before I get into my bite-sized review, there is one interesting story/conversation that was submitted to us by Fred, one of the Bourbon Bytes members here on my platform. By the way, if you guys want to support the channel, you can do so for as little as $2 a month at bourbonbytes.com. I call it the Byte Club. That's where you get access to fun things like our VIP lounge on Discord, our monthly movie night, our tastings, our after party, all that fun stuff. So if you want to join us, it does mean a lot to me. bourbonbytes.com or patreon.com/bourbonbytes if you feel more comfortable there. But yeah, Fred dropped this news story right before I recorded this podcast, so I figured I had to touch on it. So this is the topic of a new Gen Z trend in alcohol, and it's not what you think. They're calling it a day cap. So instead of your nightcap at the end of the night, they're actually celebrating earlier in the day. And they say that this is because there's a greater interest in 1, lower ABV cocktails, 2, more outdoor and social drinking, and 3, going home earlier. And for that last point, I can absolutely get behind, because as I am entering my early to mid 30s, I am starting to feel that not going out late is the typical pattern in my lifestyle. They actually are dubbing this afternoon society, and it's that time between after work and before dinner. So it's kind of, I guess, typically happy hour. I mean, I guess that's the normal phrase for that. But it sounds like a lot of people are turning towards these 3 to 6 p.m. drinking periods and then going to dinner and then kind of ending their night there. They're not going out partying. They're not, well, they might be partying, but they're not partying with alcohol. It's interesting. So I may have to join in on this day cap trend. Not to say that I haven't been doing that already, but tonight it's late. I'm recording this, so it's a nightcap for me. But maybe next week I'll record it earlier in the day and do a day cap. All right, well, that does it for this week's news and topics. If you ever have anything you want me to discuss on the podcast, feel free to shoot me an email, contact@bourbonbytes.com. But speaking of which, let's go ahead and get into this week's bite-sized review. All right, well, when I said this week's bite-sized review is special, I meant it, because this is a very special bottle. And I want to give a shout out to Byte Club members Patrick and Heather Starkey. They actually shared their bottle of this with me when I was over at their place in May, and I immediately knew I had to go pick up my own bottle. This is the Little Book, the Infinite Edition number 2. So this is a very special line of Little Book bourbon from Jim Beam Distillery, the first of which came out in 2024. This came out towards the end of 2025, and this one is super cool because it's made up of a 22-year-old bourbon distilled by Booker Noe, a 10-year-old bourbon distilled by Fred Noe, and a 7-year-old bourbon from Freddie Noe. So this is 3 generations of Jim Beam distillers coming together. Obviously not in person because Booker Noe has unfortunately passed, but coming together with their bourbons and making a family blend. And I think that's so cool and so special. Now, this one comes in at 60.2% ABV, so 120.4. It is uncut, unfiltered, and man, well, I mentioned this is a dark bourbon. I had a pour of Blanton's Gold just before this while I was recording the first part of the podcast, and side by side with this Booker's Little Book Edition 2, there's no comparison. That is such a richer, darker, almost like a mahogany wood note. It's beautiful. By the way, MSRP on this bottle is about $200. I actually got it a bit cheaper. My local liquor store, K&L Wine and Spirits, had this one going for about $180. I guess I would say $180. All right, let's go and get that poured and give it a nose. Oh, right off the bat, man, that is just a deep, rich, extremely well-balanced nose. I mean, it's not even spiky in the oak direction. You know, there's some 22-year-old bourbon here, but it's not nosing like it's over-oaked or anything of that realm. It's actually got a lot of sweetness going on. I think maybe because more of that 7 to 10-year-old bourbon from Fred and Freddie are really rounding it out. They might be the majority of the batch here. But there is some older, richer characteristics here too. I mean, this smells as good as it gets when it comes to bourbon. It's just the most pleasant blend of vanilla, oak spice, a little bit of cinnamon. I mean, it almost smells like fall in a glass, and I love that. It makes me really want to go in for a sip. So let's give it a try, guys. Cheers. Oh, man. Yes, just as good as I remember it. And I promise I had been drinking a little bit that night, but not enough to completely overshadow the fact that this is one of the best bourbons I've ever had. And I'm not even joking about that. I mean, I'm a little biased because I'm a Jim Beam lover. Like Jim Beam and Heaven Hill are my top two favorite distilleries. So when you give me some older distillate from Jim Beam combined with some of the best stuff they produce, it's hard for me not to fall in love with this bottle. And on first sip, I'm in love again. Like I said on the nose, it is dark, it's rich, it's spicy, but weirdly enough, it doesn't necessarily get spiky in any direction. It just is a very well-rounded bourbon, and you wouldn't expect that with these two extreme components, right? Like a 22-year-old and a 7-year-old. You wouldn't think it'd be well-rounded, but the balance here in the blending has really mellowed it out to a point where I would never guess that this is 120 plus proof. I mean, it drinks so smoothly, and it has such a rich, full-bodied mouthfeel. I will say the oak shows up quite a bit more on the palate. It's a little bit more tannin forward. It's definitely enticing. It's not overwhelming at all. It's actually working in a really, really good way here. And it's not just that, it's a charred oak. I mean, you can really get that barrel char influence here. Baking spices, I would say, leans a little bit in the cinnamon territory like I got on the nose. Nothing too crazy. You know, it's not like a super strong rye spice or anything like that. But again, it's just reading as an extremely balanced, well-rounded bourbon. And for, $180 to $200, I mean, that's what you want, right? You don't want it to be too crazy. You want it to be just what it is, which is the best of a culmination of 3 generations of master distillers. And finish-wise, like I said on the palate, this has a really nice full-bodied experience. It doesn't linger too long. Honestly, this is actually leaning towards a medium to long finish. It's not like exceptionally long, but I think that's okay. It's a great finish. It's a great flavor profile. And again, I think it drinks way lower proof than it actually is, which is a good thing in this situation. It's warming, but not overwhelming is probably the best way to put it. So now it comes time for me to give my rating. So here with the Byte-Sized review, we keep it short and sweet. I just limit it to a 1 score out of 10. And this one is almost, is this going to be one of the first? I don't know if it's the first, but is this going to be one of the first 10 out of 10s I give on the podcast? Well, let me think. Okay. Pricing, let us say like around 180 to 200, relatively available. I mean, it's obviously not the most available product on the market, but I was able to find it in Southern California on a whim after trying it for the first time. But all that being said, I mean, this is such a special edition of a bourbon, and I'm not usually a high-end bourbon spender, honestly. I mean, if you look at most of my bottles, they're all around 100 or less. So this isn't going to be something I'm going to seek out and buy multiple bottles of. It's definitely a special occasion pour for me. It's one that I'm going to have this bottle. I'm going to treasure it for a while. But with that being said, that's going to drop it down just a tiny bit. I'm going to mark this as a 9.5 out of 10. The only thing that would make this a 10 for me is one, if it was a little more available, let's say I could get it everywhere, and two, if it was a little more cost effective. If it was closer to the 175 price point regularly. Like I said, I got this on sale for 180. I think retail on it's 200. So if it were closer to 160 to 175 and it was available, this would be a pure 10 out of 10 for me. It would be one that I would go out and buy a backup to my backup bottle. It's definitely going to earn a spot in my top 10 whiskeys of 2026, unless this last half of the year just completely changes everything. But for now, this is going to be in a high position on that chart, just based on my prediction for June of 2026. So thank you all so much for listening. If you ever have a bottle that you want me to review that you think beats this one, let me know. So far, it's going to be hard to do. Once again, thank you all so much for making it to the 100th episode of this podcast. It really means a lot to me to have you here. This has been the Bourbon Bytes podcast, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. I'll talk to you guys next episode. Cheers and game on.